Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around the world. Welcome back to, if I can actually get this set up correctly, the Health Optimization Doctors Roundtable. It should have been up there, and it was, of course, Jay Campbell Live. And I'm joined by all my good doctor friends. Dr. Rob, what's up, Rob?
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
I got Dr. Rudy over there to the far right. What's up, Rudy? I think you're on mute. Can't hear you. It's okay. And then we're also, of course, joined by Dr. Keith Nichols. Keith, you're on the road in a hotel, I think.
I am in Atlanta. So, man, good to see all you guys.
And then we have the one, the only, the infamous Rick Collins. Rick, what is going on, my brother?
Hello, gentlemen. How are you? This is like, is there a joke like 4 doctors and a lawyer walk into a podcast? There's got to be. Otherwise, let's come up with one.
Hey, man, the key in life or the goal in life is literally to avoid all doctors and lawyers. But on this show, you can't.
You got nothing but. Yeah.
That's not going to happen tonight. So, obviously for all of you guys that are watching, first off, thank you for watching. We are sorry. This should have happened last Wednesday. But as all of these guys know, my plane was diverted from Tampa to Orlando. But amazingly enough, JetBlue still flew us on to Tampa. And when I got to the rental car counter, the rental car guy was like, dude, I just dealt with 10 different people who had the same thing because there was really bad weather in Atlanta, but you're the only guy whose airline flew him to his original destination. These people had to rent a car because you guys know, right? The airlines will just say, hey, good luck.
Yeah.
Rob knows because he flies. But anyway, so we're here tonight. We have a bunch of different things to talk about. Rick, why don't you just real quick for the people, I mean, everybody does know you, but just for the people that maybe are new to you, just tell everybody who you are, maybe just this 30-second,
So I'm not a doctor for starters. So I'm the odd man out here. Being a lawyer, my mother wanted me to be a doctor. So
Didn't you play one on TV, Rick?
I probably have, yeah, and so I'm a disappointment to begin with. But no, I went to law school. I'm a former competitive bodybuilder, so I come from the space of nutrition and training and fitness and physical culture. I've been able to kind of blend my avocation with my vocation as a trial lawyer into kind of this lawyer to the fitness industry that includes folks who are in the TRT community as well as in the bodybuilding community. I love what I do, and thank you for having me on the show.
And you are amazing at what you do. And true story, and all of these guys know this, without Rick Collins, I would not be here right now, because way back when in 2014, I sent Rick a white paper of the first book, the TRT manual, and he didn't know me from Adam. And I was actually afraid to send it to him. And he actually read it, and he came back to me in like 2 days and was like, this is amazing, but I've got to be honest with you. Yeah, there's a risk. So I was like, and then Nelson Virgil, obviously, everybody knows the story, later was like, Rick's a friend of mine, but F Rick, you're going to put this book out there. I'm on panels with the FDA. It was actually hilarious. So anyway, it's amazing how all of us now are here. And then, of course, Rick met Keith when Keith and I spoke that was 5 years ago now, Keith.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
5 years ago in Canada. And then, of course, I met all these other guys, of course, Rob and Rudy, through the medical conferences over the years. And I don't know, actually, no, Rick, you met Rudy. You've met Rudy, I think, at AMMG, right? Have you guys met?
I don't know. We may have been there together. We may not have met. Obviously, I know Dr. Rob. I know Dr. Keith very well, and you, Jay. So yeah, this should be fun.
I mean, we cannot talk about the things that we talked about earlier today in our text thread.
Yeah.
But if we could, it would be the greatest podcast possibly ever. But no, we can't talk about that. But let's open, because we do have some really hot topics to talk about. But let's open with what just came down to pack, realistically in the last couple of days. And of course, Rick, you shared, which I actually shared to my email list today, which was great. I got a ton of feedback on it.
Cool.
The likelihood, and I love your interpretation of it, but clearly the FDA is now starting to get quote unquote hot and bothered by compounding pharmacies selling let's just call it adulterated versions of non-FDA approved peptides. And obviously some of the peptides that the compounding pharmacies are manufacturing and selling are undercutting the prices of the non-generic versions of, like, call them the GLP-1, agonists like Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide, and Ozempic, which is semaglutide. And all of these guys are familiar because they all prescribe them in their practice. Of course, Rudy too, does a lot of weight loss in Florida. And they're amazing agents when they're used correctly. But again, they're attempting, meaning the FDA, to regulate the sale of them. And so now the concern is for all of us and for anybody that's in this industry, that will the FDA eventually start flexing their muscle and stopping the sale of non-FDA approved peptides? So I'll just go to you first, Rick, with your thoughts on that, because obviously you have shared a lot of color today.
Sure. So yeah, we had some discussions about this today, and my take, and I have a copy of it here. And if anybody isn't on your list and wants to read it, I posted it on my social media. So it's called Prohibition on Wholesaling under Section 503B, which deals with compounding of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, a guidance for industry. So first, when FDA posts a guidance, it's not law. It's simply their interpretation of the law. So, and it's a draft guidance. So it's not yet even a guidance. It's a baby guidance. It's in the evolution of becoming a guidance, but it's not even quite a guidance, and it's far from a law. That said, it's an interpretation of what the law says. And the way I read this guidance, it doesn't really change the way I interpreted the law up until now. And so it just sort of clarifies it, because I think FDA is now probably getting pressure from some of the big pharmaceutical companies who are saying, look, there's a process by which a drug is to come to market. And it costs us $800 million or whatever it is to put it through the phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. And so now we've got these compounders who are coming up with synthetic chemicals, which may have physiological benefits, possibly or not, but we really don't know it because they haven't gone through the phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. And they're just putting them on the market and competing with the drugs that have gone through that full process. And how could the drug approval process have integrity and continue, and they use those words in the guidance, if we allow this sort of end run, this bypassing of that process? You like a peptide, you think it's going to be great, fantastic. There's a way that comes to market, and it's going to cost $800 million or more to bring it to market. You don't want to go through that. Well, then, okay, then you're not bringing it to market. So that's essentially what it's saying. So I think the Ozempic issue has been getting some press in the mainstream media now, and the idea that there might be compounded versions of some of these diabetes drugs are now being popularly used. I'm sure you guys deal with it every day. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer. And I have friends asking me every day, look, I'm about 5 to 10 pounds overweight. What do you think of Ozempic for me? So this is it's huge now. And so it was just a matter of time until there was some catalyst for FDA to, like a sleeping giant, rouse itself up enough to make a statement. Now, does even a draft guidance mean that there will be action taken? I don't know. FDA has not been consistent, to put it charitably, in its enforcement efforts. So, what it will do, I don't know. But this is at least a public statement that it's aware that there are these things that are out there that are being compounded, and they're either knockoffs of drug products that have gone through the approval process and are now being, competed with unfairly by products that didn't go through that process, or these peptide or other types of products that haven't gone through any rigorous testing, other than maybe some animal studies or, anecdotal studies or a few, but certainly nothing that meets the requirements of the approval process. And FDA is saying, we don't like that.
Well said. Keith, I'm going to go to you first, but let me just set this up. And Rob, you and I and Rudy, we all talked about this at dinner 2 months ago, by the way. Can you believe it was 2 months ago? It was like we were just together a couple of weeks ago. But we're hearing through the grapevine, and Keith confided this today from Neil, that this is actually the beginning of the end for compounders. And the reason that is Rick just hit on it. This is a massive pharmaceutical, financial boom now with tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro, and of course, Owegi or whatever it is, semaglutide, whatever it's called, Ozempic. Yeah. Well, right now, tirzepatide in the Wall Street Journal article that ran 2 weeks ago, they're already projecting it to be the #1 pharmaceutical drug of all time, right? So, these are monster numbers. And so why would they not, again, protecting their business interests? Because as you said, they spent $800 million to $1 billion to get it legal and approved, right? Why would they not want to go after the companies that are undercutting them? And as these guys know, when I say undercutting, we're talking like 1/4 to 1/5. But Keith, share with us today what you were told.
Well, okay, a couple of things just to touch on what Rick did talk about is, there's two points that he made. There's the compounding of the peptides that, really have research. They're for research purposes only right now, the majority of them. All right. Yep. So we know that. So, but also the ones that are being compounded like Ozempic that are already FDA approved drugs, Novo Nordisk, the maker of Ozempic, is now presently suing. This is front page. This was all of you are suing clinics,
everybody,
and compounding pharmacies that are producing it. So that, you got two little sections here. We got compounded versions of FDA approved products and then compounding of non-FDA approved products. Right. So there's two different subjects. So when I did talk about this with Neil, he did tell me that according to the new CEO of Belmar, as of November the 1st, all peptides will be illegal for pharmacies to manufacture, compound, and dispense. The only exception is that they are already commercially available and on the FDA's list of approved products that can be compounded. Cimarelin, ipamorelin will be compounded, all others not.
So imagine that for you guys. Obviously, this is like, because we know what's going on to the global public / audience that will mostly be watching this in the rerun. They don't really understand the significance. Rob, explain the significance, and Rudy, you can follow up with that, of how big that is to the compounding industry at large if that actually comes to pass.
I don't feel the sky is falling just yet. I think there's time to see how this plays out. Cimarelin, ipamorelin, I would think tesamorelin would stay around because you can get it as a grifted seed.
Yeah, exactly. But nobody can afford it.
Nobody can afford it. But from my perspective, I use the tried and true anyway. So growth hormones here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Right. It's not a controlled substance.
Right.
It's not going to change much how I practice. Sure, it'd be great to have access to certain ones easily, but there's an underground market. They're going to show up. People are going to find a way. They'll just make it in Mexico and cross the border, or you'll fly over.
I might know a guy in Mexico.
And you have to really be careful of that in Mexico. I did purchase just to test for my patients.
It was fake.
All of it. It's fake. I got three times. They sent it over.
You can't buy anything.
You can't buy just a little bit of it. So anything that you buy in Mexico in the pharmacies, it's counterfeit made.
Yeah, no. It's
made for the cartels. That's all it is, and it all
cartel counterfeit.
It tested
I live in Mexico, so
every one of them tested negative. Yeah,
the price is a joke. But to add to Rob, Rudy, I want to get your take because you probably prescribe GLPs more than anybody here. What will it do? And obviously, be as candid and as honest as you want to be here. It's going to really hurt the public's ability to access these life-changing peptides, correct?
Completely. Jay, and first, Rick, great meeting you. I love the way you put the expose on this, and Keith said it well. We're talking about two things. One about FDA-approved peptide like the GLP-1 that they're compounding. And per the law, and Rick, you tell me if I'm right, if those medications are in short supply, the compounding pharmacy are within the right to compound them. And all my patients will tell me, their doctors write them for Wegovy, Ozempic, or Mounjaro, but they are not available. So they have to turn to something else. So this is one point for the GLP-1. The other point is for the non-proven, non-FDA approved peptides. That's another picture. But I'm big on GLP-1. And the one thing I want to tell everybody here is how amazing those GLP-1 medications are. To me, they are the biggest change that we've seen in medicine since, I don't even know, since the invention of penicillin. Because the biggest problem that we're having in our society is insulin resistance. Because of our bad diet, the toxins, the EDC, and all the pesticides that you've been exposed to. So even patients, we talk about this all the time, they know what they're supposed to be doing to lose weight, but it becomes almost an addiction type because of the poor food that they're eating. GLP-1s have given people hope to finally get control of their cravings, get control of their insulin resistance. GLP-1s have been shown to not only help patients lose weight, lose visceral fat, it's been shown to decrease risk of heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, decrease alcohol use, addiction. So this is something that the people are going to continue asking for. And to me, the pharmaceutical companies are not going to be able to keep up with the demand. Novo Nordisk has already said that. So for those ones, the GLP-1s, to me, there's always going to be a place for them because the law, Rick, tell me if I'm right, stipulates that if they're in short supply, compounding pharmacies are allowed to compound them.
But there's not a shortage. They've made it real clear. There's not a shortage right now. And the reason there was a shortage, and let's be clear on all this too, is because it was made for type 2 diabetics, and people with true obesity. But there was a groundswell of people that really didn't need it. They want to use that 10 or 15 pounds and want the easy way. And that was a real problem. They weren't made for that, but that's what they were being used for. So, for people that could afford it. And so it is affordable and very available for people that can get it covered under their insurance if they actually have the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes or obesity, which 60% of people.
I was just going to say that.
So
we're up to 70% obese and overweight now.
Yeah. So, it is available.
Welcome to America.
And Rudy, and can we kind of get one elephant out of the room right here? And the frustrating thing as a doctor, and I'm sure you guys see it too, is that you can't even get the majority of patients that you have to do this long term, which is to maintain the trifecta of health. I call it. It is nutrition, healthy eating, it is exercise, and it is hormone optimization. They will start, and then as years go by, they get very complacent, and they'll stop doing it. And you have to maintain all three of those things for maximum health as you age. And most people will not do it. And when they stop doing it, they realize, I don't feel good anymore. They won't pick it back up. What they then start looking for are the easy buttons.
Yeah, exactly.
Peptides, the GLP-1 agonists. And there is no easy button, guys. There is no easy button. There's no
totally true
fix. You've got to have your trifecta of health. And then, if you want to add things on top of that, that's fine. But, even if you're on a GLP-1 agonist, do the other three, and especially do your hormones, because the testosterone will prevent the muscle loss.
Listen, I want to talk about that, Keith. I really want to keep going with this, and I'll go back to you in a second. That's what's most important about this, because Rick, the problem is the people out there, and look, I'm just going to use his name. I don't like throwing people under the bus, but Dr. Peter Attia has a very large audience, and he is out there. And Rudy, you and I have already talked about this. He is talking shit about GLP-1 agonists, and he's interpreting the research and, again, the inflamed comorbid people who, as Keith just talked about, don't have the trifecta dialed in, right? They're already comorbid. They're type 2 diabetics, they're obese, and they're easy button people, and they're not doing anything right. And shame on their doctors for not coaching them on how to do it right and how to lift weights and how to eat enough protein so there's no bone loss. The newest article in the New York Post was flat ass syndrome from taking GLP-1 agonists, which, as you guys all know, well, yes, if you don't eat and you have fat in your gluteus, then yes, your butt's going to thin out. But it's right. So I'm going to go back to you, Keith. The problem is with this, and this is where all of us play such a huge role, is coaching people how to do this right. Because as you said, if you have the trifecta dialed in, these things are, as Rudy said, life-changing. Literally, they cure bad habits. There's all this research that shows that people that are, what do you call it? Just completely compulsive disorder, whatever that is.
OCD type.
OCD people. Changing their behaviors that literally have led them into being depressive and all these other things. And again, there's research. Again, Rudy's right about this. So they really are life-saving. But I'll go back to you, Keith. Why is this still the research out there? The Peter Attias, there's other people. Berg is now talking shit about him. All these people are glomming onto this. Why are the doctors not educating their patients on how to do this right?
Well, we're still right now, mainstream medicine doesn't have it right. We all know that. This is what we fight against all day long. They had it wrong. Peter and Huberman, when they did their little, podcast on hormones was, there's a lot of good information, and there was a lot of information that was not so good. And the average listeners don't know how to discern good from the bad. But look, we just, you can never get away from your foundation of health. I don't care if you're building a house, a golf swing, a wrestling move. You got to start with a strong foundation. And the foundation, once again, is exercise, consistent nutrition, and hormone optimization. You have to start there. And, and that's where it has to start. And then you can start adding layers on top of that. But you just don't understand how hard it is to get people to just do those three things. They won't. How many people do you know that consistently do those three things?
Almost none.
Every day. Not many.
But if I may add again, so for me, I go beyond the trifecta. I have a 4-pronged approach to my patients. The lowest base is nutrition. Agreed 100%. We all agree on this. My next stack is exercise. No questions. My third stack is mindset. I coach my guys on mindset a lot. Rick, Keith, you talked about this. Your guys, how mature you get them to be. And my fourth become hormone optimization, including testosterone, thyroid, and insulin if I need to. There's a study that just came out, those forever chemicals. I don't know if you guys seen that, those PFAS, forever chemicals, that's 97% of them have been found in American blood. 3M is settling a $10.3 billion lawsuit because it contaminated the water. So that PFAS, those forever chemicals, have been shown to increase risk of diabetes, insulin resistance, fatty liver. So although you have some people that may try to eat better because they are contaminated by those endocrine disrupting chemicals, it is harder for them to do this. So what I've found is when I optimize somebody on testosterone, and Keith, they still can't stick with it, I have another tool as the GLP-1 to really help them. I transform my patients from non-compliant to compliant with the help of the GLP-1. And I have a saying that says results beget results. Once my guy starts losing the first 10, 15 pounds, he puts in some muscle, he becomes a compliant patient. So now he can listen and do the thing better. So our goal is always, what tools can I bring to my patients to get them to where we know we need them to be? And to me, testosterone, GLP-1, metformin, all those things are tools I have on my tool belt to get patients to what I call their Dr. Rudy best life.
I have those tools too, but as soon as I tell them, okay, here's your GLP-1 agonist. Okay, doc, can you give it to her? Yeah, it's going to be $1,200 a month. No, thank you.
Right. So that definitely becomes a prohibitive.
Rob, hold on. Before you say anything, I want to say that's the longest I've ever heard you go without saying anything. But continue.
I was just listening. I want to hear what everybody had to say. I agree with everyone. I mean, in a sense, I have my stepwise process: sleep, exercise, restorative practices, intensive diagnostics, nutrition, hormone optimization, supplementation, right? And detoxing. And Rudy hit on that aspect very well. Everyone is so polluted anymore. In the realm of my career, I'm detoxing more and more people. And oftentimes I find, once I get them detoxed and can clean out their liver and bind these heavy metals and all these other toxins and get them out of their body, things really change. And the benefit of the GLP-1, GLP agonist, right, is it works in the brain. So it really changes behavior. Yeah. And it does help move the needle very quickly. I don't, people talk about flat ass syndrome and muscle wasting.
Ozempic face you're hearing now.
Yeah, you'll see that if they're not, a really key component is nutrition.
Right.
So I had a guy today, he's like, I don't ever want to eat. It's been 3 days. I'm like, no.
You got to eat.
You're not following the plan, right? Because I'll put them into nutritional ketosis, but, I'll calculate out, I want you to have 2,000 or 2,100 calories. You're going to eat your one meal a day, what it is, because we're going to get these requirements. Yes, we're going to be in a caloric deficit. Yes, we're going to use intermittent fasting, and we're going to use all these other principles. But you still need to maintain your nutrition. Otherwise, these things are going to happen. And of course, they're on androgens as well. I don't see the muscle wasting, and I follow this with.
Of course, there is no if you do this right.
You're not doing these other items.
The key word is
you're going to see muscle.
They're on androgens.
Right.
Now, Jay, the normal population out there that is already hormonally, immunosuppressed, they're not
Bankrupt, hormonally
They're
bankrupt.
going to lose lean muscle mass.
That's right.
They're going to.
That's right.
Okay? You're going to, because number one, their hormones aren't optimized.
That's right.
So we know most of them run around with poor hormones anyway. But when they get on Ozempic, they're going to lose fat and lean muscle mass. They're going to lose it both.
Right.
But people that are hormonally optimized at the same time will preferentially lose body fat.
That's exactly
We've
right.
got studies on military men where
It's
they do.
magic.
So
It's what Rudy says, it's magic when you do the trifecta and then you add it in. But you're right, the people are not adding it in with the trifecta. And again, this comes back to the doctors that they're working with. And that's what Peter Attia pisses me off, because I'll see him talking about the research again in these comorbid compromised people who are not hormonally optimized, who don't have the trifecta. And they're the ones that are creating the controversy. And all of the, of course, mainstream rags, Rick, are writing about it. And it's maddening, because then the people that could really utilize these things, again, working with you guys and docs like you guys, well, there's not a lot of docs like you guys, but there's a few, but the reality is that the people are being misled. And so it's like this it's
more
like a
fear.
double-edged sword.
More fear porn. Oh, you can't take this. You're going to lose all your muscle.
right.
Jake, what do I call the T-square stack? Testosterone and tirzepatide.
Yep.
Right? You get a patient on this. And Keith, I agree with you. The $1,200, and it's something that most people cannot afford. But again, in Miami, and I work at a Native American clinic where they cannot find, and it is a federal program, they cannot find the 5 milligram, the 2.5 milligram of Mounjaro. The prescription will write the prescription. Sometimes it takes 3 months that is in back order, and they cannot find it. So there's a lot of clinics who are using those compounded versions. I won't say anything. But on those patients, instead of not on it, that's a much better price. So again, for some patients, it is life-saving. And when they come to docs like us, who preach nutrition, exercise, hormone balance, then you add the GLP-1.
Yeah.
Eventually the GLP-1s are even going to be FDA approved for alcohol use disorder. So, once that's going to be there, even if you have 5 pounds to lose, if that can help you quit drinking, I do a combination of GLP-1 like Mounjaro and Vivitrol, which is naltrexone, a monthly naltrexone.
Yeah.
For alcohol, it is amazing. So it's not only for diabetes or weight loss. GLP-1s work in the brain. It's now showing that it's decreasing the dementia risk, Alzheimer's dementia, called type 3 diabetes, because of insulin resistance. Yeah. So it's going to increase the scope. And now there's the 3G rethaclutide that's coming out. That's
unbelievable. Did you guys?
I think there was just a study too. There was just something that came out on the these products with respect to gambling addiction and all sorts of stuff.
Well, so look, he just said it. Retatrutide's meta-analysis is released on Monday, you guys, and I posted on Twitter. I mean, if the data is to be believed, and again, they've got pretty deep studies, and again, remember, this is in comorbid people. So we're not talking about the people that we're working with for the most part, at least not regular customers. These are dumpster fire people that are in these trials, right? So, and they're getting insane results. So you can only imagine what the triple agonist will do with, the people that have the trifecta balanced in. So it's not like it's going away, as one of you guys was saying in the very beginning. I think it was you, Rob, that it's only going to get better, right? Like biochemistry is improving, molecular biology and dynamics are improving. The golden age of, let's just call it molecular light medicine, whatever this is only going to get better and better. So to me, even if the FDA starts outlawing this, Rick, let's say they actually do get off the keister and start, exercising their purview, and they do, Keith's right, Neil's right, they shut it all down on November 1st, it's not going away. There's such a demand. There are literally now hundreds of millions of people that are aware of the GLP-1s and the agonists and the GIP agonists. They will get them somewhere. And it's like Keith was saying, then it just makes it worse, because then it just goes deeper into research chemicals,
Right.
So, I mean,
that happens with whenever you shut off the legitimate supply,
right?
And there's still a demand. This is the most basic law of economics, right? Demand begets supply. So if you shut off the legitimate sources of supply, that's when the black market balloons. There will become alternative ways of people getting it. I mean, that's what happened for a long time after the 1990 steroid law went into effect, right? This was really before the golden age of TRT or testosterone optimization. There was a period of time where the medical community just walked away from steroids and testosterone completely in the early 90s. And what happened? The black market just ballooned. And for that still exists today because of the controlled substance on a lot of those androgens. I represent a lot of clients in that community, in the black market community of anabolic steroid distribution, manufacture, and trafficking. I probably represented more steroid underground lab traffickers than any other lawyer who's ever been born. I mean, I've had tons of those cases, and some of those guys are meticulous in their quality control, believe it or not. Others, not so much. And yet there's people who are injecting these products that they bought on Instagram that were made in somebody's kitchen. And so, when we crack down on the medical community that is involved in the chain of supply for certain drug products, the end effect of that is not necessarily an improvement in public health.
100%.
And that's what your vision is, right? Like, we're all healers. Our vision is to heal people.
Right? So this segues perfect into our points then. So we hammered that for 30 minutes, and I think we gave really great insights. And honestly, guys, I think we've all talked about this. When we write the book, I mean, you guys just gave me an amazing idea. Like, we will literally write a chapter on how to, once the trifecta is dialed, how to add these agents bit by bit to optimize. Because as Rudy knows, and Rob knows, and Keith, I know you know this too, when you use tirzepatide with testosterone, it's insane. There's literally nothing like it, right? So, I mean, if retatrutide is that much better than tirzepatide, you can imagine where we're going to go. But that's a whole other topic for another day. But we'll write about that in the upcoming version of the book. But Rick, to segue, because you kind of just hit it, why is growth hormone not controlled like testosterone? And what, get into that.
Sure. So well, how did testosterone wind up in a law that deals with cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, Vicodin? I mean, what is a hormone doing in the same criminal act infrastructure as those other things?
I wish we had Anthony J on the show right now, Keith, because he could add his commentary to that. Yep. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
So I've always said it's the apple in the orange crate of the Controlled Substances Act, because it doesn't really belong there. And I'm not the only one who's said that, because when Congress was thinking about doing it in the late 1980s, in order to police sports cheating, that was the whole reason. Yeah. Ben Johnson in the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, Korea, ran really fast, faster than Carl Lewis, the American. The Canadian sprinter wins the gold medal, tests positive for Winstrol, and suddenly there's this uproar over the idea of sports integrity. Congress wants to act on it. The FDA, the DEA, the American Medical Association, the National Institute on Drug Abuse all send in representatives saying, time out. No, don't do this. testosterone and these other drugs are not like narcotics. They're not like these addictive drugs that have the sort of potential for abuse and dependency in the same way. Congress didn't want to hear it. And so they made testosterone and its synthetic cousins into controlled substances. They were also presented at that time with the idea, well, wait a minute. There's athletes who are using growth hormone also, and they're using it to get an advantage in sports. So why don't we make growth hormone a controlled substance just like anabolic steroids? And that pitch was made. And the reason that didn't happen and the way that was prevented from happening was because there was a bunch of pediatric endocrinologists who testified to Congress that it would be unfairly stigmatizing for short-statured children to make them take a drug that was a controlled substance. There would be issues of access and reduced ability for people to get it. And so Congress was persuaded that in the same way that criminalizing steroids was to save the children more than anything else and sports, well, the non-controlled status of growth hormone was to save the children also, the ones who need a little bit of height. But Congress did in 1990 take growth hormone and put it into a different law that restricted its prescribing and distribution in ways that I personally think were never intended by anybody to sort of restrict the off-label prescribing of growth hormone. But that law, if you read it on its face, it narrows the options for prescribing growth hormone to only authorized uses, of which there aren't very many.
Yep. If I can say something, Rick, what you just said, that's my little groupie moment to you. Because I've been doing that testosterone for about 15 years, and it always boggled my mind. Why is it a controlled substance, like all those substances? And it's when I heard you were on the show, I forgot which one, and I found out it was because of the Canadian Ben Johnson,
yes,
who went through them fast, that now they took away this amazing medication from us. So that's how
thank you, Rudy. And I'll tell you, at a conference probably 5 or 8 years ago, somewhere in that range, I got the chance to meet Ben Johnson in person. And, we had a little chat, and I said to him, he was somewhat sheepish in his response, but I said, look, I owe a lot of myself and my family owe a lot to you, because that sprint in 1988 was really the cascade. It caused this incredible movement that ultimately resulted in me being able to practice an area of law that didn't exist until that race.
Yeah. Completely. Yeah. So like when you listen to some of the purists out there, they're saying for sports, and I heard you talk about this also, Rick, you said for sports competition, if they say a group of people are not going to use that and they compete against each other, I agree, they should not. But for health, for the regular person who's not going to be in a competition, if testosterone is going to help you, and it doesn't matter if you're not below that 300 arbitrary number, you know what? If they call it cheating, if it's cheating for health, I'm okay with it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we sometimes overcorrect problems as a society. So, okay, let's say there's a problem of cheating in sports. The athletes are using things, they're chemicals. The other athletes feel compelled to have to use them in order to compete. I get that. And so, but we can create rules of sport and testing programs that would deal with it in sport. Why are we now taking this super broad approach so that people who have nothing to do with sports are being either prevented from accessing medications that might be good for them, or are, as I see very often, being arrested and prosecuted and convicted and ultimately suffering from all the collateral consequences of a criminal conviction, which include impact on housing, employment,
everything,
education, your whole licensing. Your whole life is turned upside down, even if you don't go to jail. And so, is that really the best solution to the problem? And we do this not to go too far afield, but it was kind of in the lines of what we talked about offline earlier, is that as a society, we tend to take a hammer to an approach that, a careful Phillips head screwdriver would be the much better approach.
A Tinkerbell deal. Well, so look, I want to say this, and you guys, so everybody here is a conspiracy analyst, right? But the reality,
I don't profess to be in your league on that, Jay.
I don't know about that.
You
Look,
got me.
You just keep you speak like a really well-reasoned lawyer, but off camera, that might not be. But no, but so you guys know this, and Dr. Anthony J is very open about this. And speaking of a conspiracy analyst now, do you guys follow his social media stuff? Like everything he posts now is like fact checkers have said that this is not true. But so he came on our show, and he's, he knows Keith personally and knows Rob, and I know he knows Rudy. And he said that when he was at the Mayo Clinic, now, and this is not bullshit for you guys that have not heard this story, that when he attempted to get testosterone powder to study, because he was like trying to understand why the fish were turning female that were released as males into the streams, tributaries, freshwater aqueducts in North America, and the EPA knew about this. He said that it was more difficult for him to get testosterone powder than it was to get plutonium to manufacture a nuclear bomb from the federal government. Now, you guys all know this. He's been on record to say this many times. It's in his book, Estrogeneration. Now, obviously, he no longer is working for the Mayo Clinic anymore, but he also has a story, which I can't share right here, which he shared with all of us, with the lead researcher, the lead estrogen researcher, who was a woman who he replaced, said to him, like off the record, about what was going on. So it's a very strange thing. And then let me give Keith credit, because Keith was looking into endocrine disrupting chemicals, and he was basically talking about estrogen resistance syndrome. What was it called again?
Testosterone resistance.
Testosterone resistance, but talking about how the estrogen receptors were actually cross-linking with the endocrine disrupting chemicals, and then there was also the androgen receptors were cross-linking, and all of this insanity. And Keith was looking into it with the EPA and all of the different varying governing bodies, and nobody would talk about this, Rick. And so now here we are 5 years later. I mean, this is, again, stuff we were doing 5 years ago. And now look at society. I mean, look at society. I mean, men look like women. We have the trans stuff. I mean, again, stuff we can't really talk about here without this show being deleted.
Well, I'll send all you guys the congressional hearing that occurred 10, 12 or so years ago.
Yes.
And they outlined everything that was going on. The scientists got up there, testified before Congress, and nothing was done.
Nothing.
But everything you're talking about, they outlined in detail. And I have the congressional hearing report that I'll send all you guys. You'll be shocked at what you read.
Yeah.
You'll be shocked at the fact that nothing was done.
Well, you know this, Jay. Probably it's got to be now over a dozen years ago. I wrote with a co-author a book called Alpha Male Challenge.
Yes.
And the book was basically it was a diet, exercise, and mindset book. Like Rudy said, you got your nutrition, you've got your training and exercise, and you got your attitude, the mindset that you've got to reclaim. So it was really a book about that. But the reason for it, what prompted me to want to write it, was just this generational decline, which all of you are familiar with.
Right.
When we look at, our grandfather's testosterone levels on average compared to our testosterone levels, and then we look at the next generation, our kids' testosterone levels, and we just keep seeing this gradual decline. Where does this lead? Sperm counts going down, testosterone levels going down, and clearly phytoestrogens and different types of endocrine disruptors are no doubt playing a role. Obesity, I'm sure, also plays a role. Lack of exercise, a softer lifestyle, potentially. We talked earlier today about, there's been some studies done on the skulls of our ancient forebears, 50,000 years ago. Our ancient forebears had pretty pronounced foreheads that were basically showed that their testosterone levels were much, much higher than ours are, because they needed it, right? They needed it. You're running from the saber-toothed tiger. You're hunting for something to eat, to bring back, to feed your family. we don't have to worry about being eaten anymore. We don't have to worry about, we can just walk up to the market and pick up pretty much. You don't even have to leave the house. You just do, they'll deliver whatever you want. So you don't, even the walking over to the supermarket is no longer a necessity. Now people are staying home. Why even go to work? Why get out of your pajamas? Why do anything? So obviously, to the extent that testosterone is a necessary chemical for physiological response to challenge, what do we need it for? So I don't see that that's going down. And I think the need for what you guys do in addressing this issue of testosterone deficiency is going to be more and more relevant as the generations go forward.
Yeah, because again, Keith, I would love to see that congressional hearing.
Just emailed it to Rick, and I was going to ask for you and Rob's email. If you'll send me your email and pop it in there, I've got it pulled up to send. I've already sent it to Rick and Jay.
Yep.
And you know what?
It was 2010. You'll be shocked at 2010 what they already knew.
They knew everything. Yeah.
No, but guys, the tide is turning because that big 3M settlement, $10 billion, is the first domino that's falling. And we need soldiers like us. Keith, you've been doing longer than all of us, but we need more soldiers to raise that awareness that it's not only, I learned a word the other day, the exposome. Everything we're exposed to from when we're in the first trimester of pregnancy, if the fetus boy is exposed to chemicals like phthalates and BPA, testicular dysgenesis syndrome, that poor little boy is at a higher risk of low testosterone, infertility. The brain doesn't form the same way. And it is changing epigenetic changes.
Yeah, it already has.
It goes down 3 generations there, Rudy. Yeah. 3 generations.
But the fact that we're talking about it more, there's more people aware about it. They're starting to have those companies are paying a settlement lawsuit. The dominoes are starting to fall. Those chemicals are becoming the tobacco of the 1980s. The only problem is there's 80,000 chemicals. So going after them one by one is going to take time. But I feel like the tide is changing, and this is the time for us to talk about it, enlist more soldiers to keep talking about it, and let those dominoes fall more and more. And in the meantime, the ones that are affected, we will help them with our trifecta of tools.
I'm really concerned about Rob. He's so he's so
you need some testosterone today.
Observant tonight. Like he's definitely moved on.
I'm on the quiet side.
He's moved on to a whole different level. He's left us all behind. But there's 2 more topics that Rick have, and they're obviously highly relevant. And then we can answer questions real quick before all you guys go. So the first one is the 3 things that prescribers should not do in today's day and age. Would you give those to us, Mr. Collins?
Sure, I could probably give you 20, but and you've seen my lecture before, and Keith has seen it too, and Rob.
Oh, yeah.
So just for prescribers and for practitioners and for clinics in general who are involved in any kind of TRT, certainly marketing becomes a big issue. If you are marketing for bodybuilding, any sort of non-medical use, and look, we've seen it, right? It's not hypothetical. We've seen the marketing over the years where
I saw a guy today in my gym, Rick, wearing Titan. What is it, Keith? What are they called? Titan? What are they called?
What?
The clinic, Titan. You guys?
Oh, yeah, Titan Medical. Yeah.
Titan Medical. This dude was like 280 and jacked, and he's wearing his Titan Medical.
And he's being treated for a muscle wasting disorder. He's part of their muscle wasting clinic. Yeah. I'm sure, because now when you look at you look at Viking Medical, you look at Defy. They have their muscle wasting programs for all these guys with muscular dystrophy, and
I should have taken a picture. I was thinking of you guys when I was doing my.
It's all over social media. I mean, all of them, and they really don't hold back.
I'm sorry, Rick. I cut you off.
No, that's okay. No. So marketing for bodybuilding, marketing just for off-label, as you guys all know, you can prescribe drugs off-label. Not a problem with that. If you have a medical purpose and you're in your medical discretion, you can prescribe a drug off-label. And most drugs, I guess, are prescribed off-label, right?
Yeah, they are.
but you can't market a drug off label. So you can't say that you're marketing this drug for an off-label purpose. And that's kind of one of the ways that, if you remember those class action lawsuits on testosterone, part of it was, one of the theories of the plaintiff's case was that the cardiac risks were not properly disclosed. But the other part of it was a marketing argument. And that is, you're marketing this off-label for a disease that or a condition that doesn't exist, that this low T, and they used the marketing campaign, is not a disorder. It's simply an off-label use, and you're marketing for that purpose. So not doing that is super important. And then the third thing I'll give you, I guess, is the idea that you always have to be aware that your records can be subject to scrutiny at some point in the future. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen both in a criminal context, God forbid, for anybody, but I've also seen it happen in the context of a medical licensing board. And I've sat in medical licensing board hearings with physicians where there's 3 endocrinologists sitting on the board, and their perspective on testosterone is that it's something that is endogenous, but nobody should ever use it exogenously, and it should never be given, and unless you have the a 20 total T level. So you've got these wildly different views of it. So they will go through all of the records, and they'll look for things like, was there a basis for the diagnosis of hypogonadism? What was that basis? What did you do? What medicines were prescribed? I mean, I've had doctors where I've sat there and I've watched the medical licensing board people go through and say, why was Anavar needed to raise his testosterone levels, and what was the purpose of nandrolone and Anavar combined with the testosterone? And look, there are, perhaps you guys are the doctors, but I suppose there's some argument that could be made that for a person who has a reaction to dihydrotestosterone that is not good, that maybe nandrolone and testosterone in smaller doses combined, because of the weaker metabolite of the nandrolone, might give a better effect. I don't know. I'll leave that to you guys. But certainly at some point, it becomes harder and harder to justify polypharmacy of androgens. So that's another thing. Dosing, look, maybe it's 100 milligrams a week, maybe it's 200 milligrams a week, but 400 milligrams a week routinely to patients who are in their late 20s or early 30s and competing in bodybuilding is probably something that's going to be these are all red flags. So a lot of it is common sense. A lot of it is like Dr. Rob said, this is about health, right? This is about optimizing the way people feel. This is not about jacking somebody up to compete in the nationals next week. It's not about that. So so being smart about it will go a long way.
Well said. Well said.
Agreed.
We got all 4 of us quiet. I love it.
Well, Rick, we talked about it last week. There's a world of medical use, misuse, and abuse, and we try to stay away from the world of misuse and abuse and stick in our medical world of medical use. And the worlds don't mix. We have one substance in common: testosterone. Other than that, it's 2 different worlds, and they should stay separated.
Right.
Well, it's like you said something today. And this is off topic because the last bullet point is is there a movement to deschedule testosterone, which would be amazing for all of us, but we'll get to that in a second. But you said something today, Keith, that was really important, right? I sent you guys that comment of that guy who's taking Natesto 3 times a day in his nose, and then he writes his whole story of like why injections didn't work, and it finds out what he was on 3 milligrams of Arimidex a week, and he was probably dying. And then Keith talked about how he's part of the woke testosterone movement, which means that they literally don't want to feel optimized because optimized is outside of the compressed standard mean deviation ranges. And so the entire thing is an absolute circus. But the reality is that they don't have anywhere to go because the doctors, as you guys know, who are not like you and they're not, working with an experiential body of practice of work of doing this for a long time, are also trying to maintain their license. And as Keith and Rob have said from, and I've learned from Neil, as you just said, Rick, to avoid the state medical licensing board scrutiny. So it's like, it's just this giant wild game. It's like we're trying to like block this hole and that hole and move from this landmine to this landmine. And who's really getting screwed is the patient.
Right. Well, Rick, we were talking about this last week in that there's this woke TRT movement, I call it, in that men that even promoted men getting testosterone, now they promote it, but only as long as they keep it within the normal range, because anything super physiologic is abusing testosterone now. So we're talking about your main forums like at Cell Mail and Reddit and T Nation. You're just abusing testosterone if your free testosterone's above 30. If it's 30 to 50, oh my God, those doctors are shameful, shouldn't be going to them. And speaking of that, the Traverse trial just came out. We talked about it last week. It finally came out right after the podcast. We talked about, finally the study that was lasted to see if testosterone increased the risk of major adverse cardiac events. Well, we know that it didn't. But here's the thing about those trials, which is always said, the devil's in the details. We knew nothing was going to happen. We predicted it. If you go back and look at that show, we said, yep, when those studies results come out, it'll show that there was no major adverse cardiac events, but also you'll show that probably men didn't do a lot better. And the reason they didn't do a lot better is in that trial, they maintained those testosterone levels less than 750. We would not let them get above 750. They had to stay between 350 and 750. So there was over a 50% dropout in the testosterone arm, which matched the placebo arm.
It means I could have been in the study without taking the medicine.
Exactly. So the point is no, there was no risk of major adverse cardiac events, but that's, there wouldn't have been either with a higher dose, but you would also have seen no adverse cardiac events with a higher dose, but you would have not seen that dropout. You would have seen a lot more improvement too. So that's the sad part of that. But at least now we can say there's a randomized control trial out there that shows that testosterone doesn't lead to heart attack, strokes. We know that now.
What I would say to other physicians that are in the hormone world or entering or are a little bit afraid, serve your mission, which is to heal people.
Right.
My mission every day isn't about anything other than saving lives, preventing cardiovascular disease, and which 1 in 3 men, 1 in 2.8 women die from heart attacks and strokes.
It's insane.
And testosterone will help stop that problem. It's part of the solution. There are many spokes to that solution, but it's part of the solution. So if you serve your mission and work to heal people and be a healer, you won't have to worry about those things that Rick talks about and alludes to. And there's plenty of those cringy clinics out there.
Yep.
100%, Rob. So well said. And because we're optimization doctors, we go even further. We save lives and we also optimize lives, because one thing we always talk about is the mental benefits of testosterone replacement therapy. Studies are very strong. How they did a JAMA psychiatry, how low testosterone predisposes to psychiatric symptoms, and replacing testosterone alleviates that. So if a patient goes to a primary care doctor or psychiatrist, they'll have no problems throwing the SSRI at the patient, which we know have been proven to have problems long term, but they'll have problems with the testosterone. This is what we can do as optimization physicians. Not only are we helping save lives, but we're helping optimize, make people live a great life and be present for their family, their community. It is about physical health, mental health, sexual health, and everything together. That's what we do. And that's why I'm proud of talking with you guys and being part of this group.
Can we add one little caveat to that, just so that men out there don't get confused, because what everything Rudy said is true. But testosterone, as Jay has said a million times, is not a panacea. If you had a genetic predisposition for certain disorders, and that disorder is not related to low testosterone, then raising your testosterone will not improve that disorder. So many men get confused. Well, I read that it will help with this, this, and this. Well, it will if it's suited. So when we correct symptoms of a deficiency and we overcome that deficiency with enough hormone, then any symptoms related to that deficiency should improve. What doesn't is not. So
if you're fucking crazy, testosterone is going to make you not crazy.
It plays this much of a role. Like all the other things: sleep, exercise, restorative practices, nutrition, hormones, optimization
Great.
of other hormone supplements. They all have to be spot on. And I don't care, and I've said it before, there is no medication or hormone that can overcome poor nutritional and lifestyle habits.
Right.
I can't give you enough of anything if you don't have your sleep, nutrition, and exercise spot on. And out of all of those, sleep and nutrition.
Well, there's one more thing too, Rob. As Neil would say,
I'm
though,
gonna
too,
add
we'll
one
quote
more-
Neil,
I'm gonna
you
add one
can't
more.
fix crazy sometimes either.
Right.
You can't
Yeah.
fix
Hormones
crazy.
fix crazy.
So to what Keith just said, and you guys know I'm the spiritual most woo-woo guy you guys all know now, right? And I literally am putting this in the 30 Days to Shreds book in the very beginning. And I'm literally saying and you guys know every book I've ever written always has the medical disclaimer that Rick helped me write in the very first one back in 2014. But I am putting in the beginning of this book, I swear to God, you guys are going to laugh when you see this, especially guys like us. It's going to say non-medical disclaimer. And then it's going to say, and Rudy, you're going to love this. And Keith, this is right in your wheelhouse. If you do not love and trust yourself, and you do not feel worthy of making and getting whatever it is that you desire, right? Lower body fat, better physical definition, whatever it is, then put this book back on the shelf if you're at Barnes & Noble, or return it to Amazon, because you're wasting your time reading this book, right? And you guys all know the people that come to you and are successful at this do love and trust themselves, because they wouldn't have found you. The people that don't love and trust themselves go to some garden variety HMO Kaiser doctor who then tells them, you don't need testosterone, you're fine. Because at the end of the day, they really don't want to change, because when they look in the mirror, they do not feel worthy of working with Dr. Keith Nichols or Dr. Rudolph Eberwein or Dr. Robert Komarek. And that's why they won't do it. But see, that's what we don't talk about all the time. Because Keith, how many times have you sat there and you told this patient, look, if you do not do these things, nothing that I can prescribe to you is going to do shit.
I tell them just like this, two ways. I say, look, I got the easy job. I can optimize your hormones. I can get your hormones as optimal as they can be. You have the hard job. You've got to put in the sweat equity. If you're not willing to do that, then this is not going to work. Right. And I will tell them, I can give you a set of tools. What I'm giving you is your tools back. I'm giving you a kick-ass set of tools, but a house won't build itself. You got to pick up the tools and use them. So yes, we have the easy jobs. They have the hard job. If you're not willing to put in the sweat equity, have the discipline, have the motivation to do it, then it won't work. It just won't work. And like I said, you got to have all three. You can't have two of the three or one of the three. You have to have all three of the trifecta of health. You have to do all three. Yeah. All right.
But again, I'm going to go back to like our earlier conversation. I agree 100%. Actually, the way I started my career, it's a weight loss clinic that I still have going on. So I've understood the psychology of weight loss a lot. And this is where my patients who used to not be able to follow those, now with the GLP-1 and the right coaching, now they turn into they're able to follow the advice. They're able to do things they knew they should have done, because it works on the dopamine reward system and it changes the brain. It's way more than a diabetes medication. This is where I've seen that the GLP-1 has become such an amazing tool, because now those patients can follow things they knew they should have done. A lot of patients, they knew they should have done it. They just don't have the willpower, willpower, quote unquote. Willpower, it's hormone sensitive. Now you give him this. Again, results beget results. I love seeing a patient who internalized that he wasn't, he was a fat slob, that he couldn't do anything.
Right, exactly.
Of that T-square combo, and you change their life. Now they become self-determined and they want to do things. I love seeing that change. I love working with the guy that was already there, but it's a special feeling when you guys are a patient who could not get there. And with the help of those tools, now GLP-1, you're able to put them into that mindset.
Beautiful. So, guys, amazing. Honestly, this has been an amazing podcast. So much knowledge is dropped in this. So, Rick, the final comment is actually they're considering truly descheduling testosterone. There's actually a movement to do it.
There is. And, if anybody had asked me probably 10 years ago,
you'd be like, get out of here.
I'd be, it's not happening. There's no political constituency that has enough clout to be able to even get this seriously considered.
Right.
Times have changed, right? And so I remember reading a few articles, probably starting three years ago or something like that, as the trans movement started to really take hold in America, and people who were born assigned female at birth and were looking to transition either to male or to somewhere along a non-binary spectrum that's more masculine. They were obviously, testosterone is the drug that facilitates that transition. So we're not talking about TRT, we're talking about another use. We're talking about, gender reassignment essentially, or changing transgender approach. And so I started reading articles by folks in this community who were complaining that the controlled substance status of testosterone is stigmatizing and limits the access for people who are assigned female at birth and want to transition. And it developed enough interest that 2 U.S. senators actually wrote a letter seeking to deschedule, either to take testosterone off the Controlled Substances Act completely, or to lower it to a lower tier, maybe a Schedule 5 instead of Schedule 3, because of the stigma and effect upon the adverse effect upon this population. And it's interesting. I don't know whether it's going to go anywhere. In reality, that population represents a very small segment of folks who are on testosterone, but it's that segment of the population that was able to get 2 United States senators to formally write a public letter demanding consideration of a lower status for testosterone. Is it going to go anywhere? I don't know. But of course, when this came out, all of the folks in the bodybuilding community were suddenly like, we never imagined we'd talk about strange bedfellows.
Yes.
We never imagined that we would have an alliance, that our greatest allies would be from the LGBT community.
Well, I wish Feinstein, somebody other than Feinstein, would have been one that wrote it, but oh well, you can't.
All right, so a couple of questions and comments, I think. And you guys see this, Rob, you've talked about this. I've been suffering from hypogonadism. Let me just put this up on the screen. I don't know who this is. Best weight loss motivation. I've been suffering from hypogonadism my whole life since a teenage. I cannot get TRT or HCG therapy. I don't have enough money, and doctors refuse to treat me because I'm too young for treatment. It's been hell. So you guys have talked about this before. You're seeing younger and younger men come in with porn and video game addictions, dopamine and serotonergic rewiring of the brain, and their bodies just literally they don't have testosterone. I mean, what do you do in situations with these guys again?
So I take a very comprehensive approach. More often than not, it's usually medication-induced hypogonadism.
Right.
So the big ones: ADD medications, ADHD, anxiolytics, antidepressants, alcohol, and then marijuana. Ever since marijuana became "quote unquote" legal, and it's okay for health purposes. It's one of the worst things for your hypothalamus and your pituitary. Absolutely destroys testosterone levels.
Right.
And it can take some time to get it back. So the first thing is I usually run these kids through detox programs. So it may take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, but I'll detox them. And it can work wonders. So getting them away from the source of the problem, first of all, detoxing them. And then sometimes I'll take a step ladder approach. If they're needle phobic, I'll use clomiphene or HCG and see if I can't reboot the whole system and get it going again, because I'd preferentially rather have them naturally producing testosterone versus at a very young age going on something that may be, imprison them for a lifetime of therapy at such an early age. So I've always been a fan of more natural methods and taking a step ladder approach to it. But every once in a while, I get one of these young fellas. It's just they don't respond to HCG. They don't respond to clomiphene. They don't respond to ganadorelin. And that's, you've got it documented. Hey, we tried all these things and just nothing's working. So we're going to try out testosterone. and bam, they're back. And so regardless of their age, it served the mission first, which is to heal people. And
it's sad that you guys can't go to the biggest tool in the tool belt. Keith, there's two-part question for you. And Rudy, you can chime in on this too. Are those guys, these young guys that are basically like these outliers, are they the ones that are suffering from severe testosterone resistance syndrome?
Oh goodness, like we talked about, I think it was 2 podcasts ago. Look, these young men that are coming in, they have lower baseline testosterone levels than the 50 and 60-year-old men that I see.
It's insane.
That's no joke. I mean, it's just amazing to see these guys come in with their levels in the 200s and the low 300s, the mid 300s. There's nothing healthy about being in your 20s and 30s with a testosterone level in the 300s.
There's guys in their hundreds. You guys have talked about Rudy.
Think about it from a reference point, though. Now the new range is going up to 916. 916. Well, 350 doesn't look too bad. But in July of 2017, it was 1197. Now 350 is not looking so good. In some labs in 2006, it went up to 1,593. Now 350 is looking really bad. So look, if we go back 50 years when testosterone levels were where they were, we weren't exposed to all these chemicals. 350 looks really bad on a level up to 1,500, really bad. Now when it's 916 and dropping, it doesn't look too bad.
Oh, it's perfectly normal. You're good. You're good.
It's got nothing to do with levels, and it's all about symptoms. And just like with testosterone resistance syndrome or insulin resistance, you can't see it. It's happening in the cellular level. And sometimes the tests aren't going to show that, but they've got all the symptoms. And what I'm doing with these young kids more and more because of all the chemicals and everything is I run them through a detox. And this one young man, he's at 120. We got him off his medications, spent a month priming his liver because his methylation pathways were terrible. So he wasn't detoxing well. So he spent a month, optimizing that, then 3 months detoxing his body and a couple months detoxing the brain with EDTA. And we've got his levels up over 700. So it can be done without going to these bigger, and his parents didn't want him on testosterone. He was 16 years old, but we really, it took some time, but we really got him back and functioning well without ever touching testosterone or even enclomiphene or HCG. So it can be done. It just takes time.
Completely. And one thing that's great is Rob, we've talked about this. I love that we're able to do those things, and we go back to the basics of nutrition, detoxification, and all this, and try to raise it. But there is definitely some guys that by the time they come to one of us, they've seen your show, Jay. They've done everything. They're trying to eat better. They're exercise. They're taking the right supplements. You see them. They're trying. And that's when I read that paper about testicular dysgenesis syndrome. Yeah. Where the fetus can be affected in the first trimester. Crazy. And you can never form the right amount of testosterone. So like this last comment, some young men will come and tell me that they said they never felt the surge of testosterone that we felt when we were
whole life, right?
Knucklehead, right?
Remember, they were exposed in utero. Their mother exposed them because that's plastics have been around.
You guys, this is all of them. We talked about this.
Every one of them,
Rick, last year.
On those patients, at some point, as Rob said, you may try all of this. At some point, testosterone is what they need. And, unfortunately, we're going to see that more and more. They'll need evidence and soldiers like us to keep showing it. I like the last study that we presented the last time, that on adolescents and young adult males, it was found to be that their testosterone symptoms started at a testosterone in the mid 400. So the main symptom was low energy and decreased motivation. Right. So the number becomes irrelevant, everything we've been talking about.
So Rick, you don't know this. These guys all do, because we talked about this on the show before, and obviously Rudy and Rob. But dude, this is how insane this is. And this, again, is right in the wheelhouse of what you guys just said. In 2021 and 2022, 50% of all males in North America, I think it was Canada and the USA, it's not Mexico, they're not measuring down there, but 50% of all males did not have sex one time in the entire year. 50%. So how is that possible? Because we all know in our ages, all we were doing was chasing tail, right? But like these guys, as Keith said, are damaged in utero. Yeah. They do not have sexual desire. As you just said, Rudy, they don't have testosterone surges. They don't have testosterone goggles. I mean, they don't even desire sex. I mean, how is that possible? That is biological system malfunction. We are not designed to not propagate the species.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly, you know, from a biological standpoint, it's you know, a lot to take in. But there's also, I guess, maybe a sociocultural component to it also.
There
I
has to
think
be.
we're living in an age where I'm not sure younger men especially know exactly what they're supposed to be doing with respect to women. The rules are very different than they ever were before. We're not sure what men should be doing or what women really are at this point. There's definitional issues. And so I think, you know, as we become more and more of a non-binary society, I think there's more confusion over what are the rules of, you know, I'm past the age. I wouldn't want, I'm not sure I'd want to be, you know, a 20-year-old male in a society where it's the rules are evolving rapidly. You know, what's acceptable today is different than what was acceptable. I mean, you can watch almost any television show that in which dating is portrayed, or there's a relationship, a flirtatious relationship from 10 or 15 years ago. And now you're looking at it and it's like, you know, people who are 20 or 25 are cringing. It's like that's rapey, you know, by today's standards. So I think that's part of it too. And we're also not valuing masculinity. I mean, as you guys know, the American Psychological Association came out in 2019 with a position paper that said that traditional masculinity is toxic. It's bad.
It's insane.
It's not good. So, you know, if that's bad, you know, then what is the male supposed to be the pursuer anymore? Is there complete parity? You know, what the hell am I
social engineering at work?
Right. So when you combine the sociocultural changes and the biological, you know, that we're talking about, and the phthalates and all of the other, you know, endocrine disruptor issues, you put it all together and it is not a good prognosis for traditional masculinity as a metaphor for testosterone and you know, vice versa.
Well said. I mean, it's more than biological. It is socio-cultural. I mean, you talk about non-binary. The fact that Rick Collins uses that term in the way that he does is all you have to say about the world.
I can only say that, you know, a lawyer's stock and trade is words, right? This is our stock, is words.
Bro, you've come a long way from the Toxic Avenger, bro.
I would have been canceled for that. Forget it. I'd be canceled for almost everything I did in the 80s. Yeah.
Oh my God. This is insane, man. Literally insane.
This next one coming up with the mycotoxins, it's the same as detoxing, but oftentimes you're going to have to use some antifungals initially, then build back the gut and come in with a detox. But mycotoxins can certainly knock down testosterone levels just as bad. It really is just literally unreal, like what is going on. All right, guys, I'm going to be respectful of your time and for all of you guys who watch tonight. So, Rick, what site would you like me to promote for you?
You can visit me at on Instagram. You and I talk a lot there. Yep. Rick Collins ESQ. So that's easy, and I try to post things. I even posted the recent FDA guidance there. So I think it's a good way of keeping track. If you want to get in touch with me for legal services, rickcollins.com is a good place that kind of describes the sorts of things that I do. So you can always find me there. And I'm very accessible if people have questions or legal problems. If I don't handle it, I probably know a top lawyer that does. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And honestly, man, I just want to say, I love you, man. Like, you're a brother to me. I mean, you literally, I wouldn't be here tonight without Rick Collins. So, I mean, like, he really does return your guys' messages.
He does.
An amazing human being. All of you guys know that have met Rick. And I'm just grateful to have you on the show, as I am grateful to have all of you guys on the show. This is going to be absolutely, as you guys all know, the best show in the medical industry for giving truthful information. In 5 to 6 months, this show is going to be in a league of its own, but just to give all the guys information. So this is obviously Keith's practice. It's tier1hw.com. He is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And yes, he does practice all across the world. We have Rob's practice, which is renewhealth.com, also everywhere. And then, of course, last but not least, Rudy is at mhilife.com. And he also has his own weight loss clinic in Miami. And you guys can find him, Rudy Best Life, on social media. So, guys, amazing, profound podcast. I'm grateful again for everybody to be here. To all of you guys out there, thank you guys for watching. Please share this podcast. I know that many of you are now doing this, and we are starting to trend a little bit higher on YouTube. So there are definitely people in the YouTube algorithm that do find value in this stuff, even though they probably didn't 5 or 6 years ago when we first started doing it. But the information has not changed. It's only gotten better. So, again, love and light to all of you guys, man. All of you guys have an amazing week, the rest of this week, and we will see everybody next Wednesday. You guys all stay around for a second. Let me just end the broadcast.